Hello, friends, and welcome back. Today, we're comparing 3 workplace conflict stories where someone decided they'd had enough. One involves a custodial revenge plot, another a factory floor standoff, and the last a dealership showdown. My toxic boss suddenly wants to be friends. I organized a dessert party in our work group chat for the one day he was out of town. I, 18-year-old female, work as a custodian for an elementary school. I recently just graduated high school and got hired for this job at the beginning of my senior year. At the start of my employment, things were going good. My boss, the head custodian of the school, was very nice to me, and it seemed like we were going to get along well. But it wasn't until January of this year when things took a turn. I'm not sure why, but my boss totally flipped on me and started to treat me like garbage. He constantly berated me, accused me of not doing any work during my shift, which was not true, gaslit me into believing all the other staff in the building hated me, which also wasn't true, told me to get over it when I asked for time off to grieve over a pet who suddenly passed, and much, much more. He even went as far as trying to prove I was a horrible employee to the principal of the school in an attempt to get me fired, but she thankfully dismissed his claims and sided with me since he had no real evidence. It's a long story that probably deserves its own separate post. But with all this being said, the way he treated me, among other things not related to work, really started to take a toll on my mental health throughout the latter half of my senior year. My grades started to slip and I got really depressed, but I refused to quit due to familial pressure, needing the money for college, and the flexible hours the job offered me. Fast forward to now, I'm still working with this absolute piece of garbage over the summer. But before you ask, yes, I am hoping to transfer to a different custodial position at a different school with hopefully a better work environment. But as of right now, that hasn't happened yet. I don't know why, but since summer started, he's flipped back to being Mr. Nice Guy and suddenly wants to erase everything that's happened between us and act like we're best friends, which I'm not having at all. He hasn't even apologized. It pisses me off so much, but I try to keep calm. His nice guy act isn't an olive branch, it's an unspoken demand. By behaving kindly now, without acknowledging past harm, he's offering a deal. You accept this pleasant fiction, and in return, he never has to admit he was cruel. It's a trade where you pay with your dignity, and he pays nothing. Anyways, with that in mind, it's now time for the revenge part. I really love to bake, and I've wanted to bake something for my coworkers for a while now. My coworkers are all really nice to me, and I felt they deserved a little treat for all they do. However, if I brought a treat into work, I would have to share it with my boss too, which irked me. But luckily for me, this week he was going on a camping trip with his family, so this was my time to strike. I picked one of the days my boss was gone and told myself I was going to make a dessert and bring it into work then. But that's not all. I decided to take it a step further. The day before I was going to bring in a treat, I sent a text message in our work group chat, a group chat with my boss in it. I informed everyone on the chat that I was planning on bringing in a dessert the next day, and if any of them wanted to bring something in as well, they were free to. My coworkers delivered. Everyone brought something. I'd coordinated a giant dessert party. I also picked the one day of the week that teachers and other staff were allowed to be in the building, so I got to share my baking with just about everybody who works at the school except my boss. The best part is that since he's camping somewhere with no cell service, he didn't see the messages coordinating this until he got back. So when he leaves his camping trip, he's going to see that everybody had a party without him. He should be back at work from his camping trip in 2 days, so we'll see if he brings it up then. But I think this was a success. This is a masterclass in social revenge. You use the group chat, the official record, to publicly and politely exclude him. He can't complain without admitting he saw the message and was bothered by being left out, which only highlights why he was left out in the first place. Update. I was missing from work for a bit because I had to undergo minor surgery, but when I got back, I made sure to bring up the party in front of my boss. He seemed pretty annoyed that we decided to have a dessert party while he was gone. I went on about how good the desserts were and how it was a shame he missed out on a lot, which made him even more upset. For a few days, I managed to bring it up almost every time I interacted with him, which really rubbed salt in the wound. I think from now on, I'm going to make a tradition to bring a dessert into work whenever he decides to miss a day so he starts to doubt if it's a coincidence or not. That sounds like the sweetest form of justice. And I'm already picturing your boss's face when he returns to find everyone else having dessert without him. It's a masterpiece of passive-aggressive joy. What a brilliant way to turn the tables. Kudos to you for thinking outside the cleaning supplies. And our second story. My boss told me, "You're not allowed to do more than what I tell you." So I did exactly that, then quit. Many years ago, I worked at a company that manufactured medical and scientific testing machines. Think shakers, small centrifuges, etc. I originally started there as a machinist until I hurt my knee at work, 8 years and 5 surgeries later, and it's still not fixed. After my injury, I switched over to the assembly side because that was more accommodating for my new limitations. Long story short, I was very good at my job, coming up with new ways to streamline several processes, new ways to assemble various things quicker than before, generally doing more work than my job description called for, and even having the temerity to prove the engineers wrong on multiple occasions. With everything I could do, I knew it would require the company to hire at least 3 people to replace me should I leave. It was announced one day that the assembly manager, AM, was leaving for a job, whether for another position within the company or the company altogether, I don't recall, and anyone who was interested could apply for it, with a promise that inside personnel would have the inside track over outside applicants. I put together my resume and went for it. The son-in-law of the company's owner was doing the interviews, which I aced. He went so far as to tell me that my resume was by far the most professional and complete he'd ever seen. But I didn't get the job. No hard feelings, I just went back to doing what I had been doing. Well, as it turned out, they hired a friend of the owner's son-in-law as the new AM. So much for that inside track, huh? It seemed to me, as well as my coworkers, that we weren't even at the same race course, but whatever, I could deal with it. I don't know what that guy's previous work experience was, but it became abundantly clear very early on that he was out of his depth. He had no clue why or how things were done the way they were, but he decided a couple of weeks after his hiring that he was going to change everything about the assembly area. One of the things he decided was that we were no longer allowed to exceed the number of machines assembled per day, nor were we permitted to skip over machines to get to others, regardless of the issue, engineering issues, bad parts, wrong parts from the warehouse, etc. Some of those parts came from the machine shop side, but many from outside companies too. But we also weren't allowed to stand around waiting for new parts from the warehouse. We couldn't even get the warehouse personnel to help find the parts we needed or help them get the parts into our assembly area. No more doing more became our mantra. Productivity and quality plummeted. Needless to say, none of the assembly team was happy in the slightest. I tried, I really did, but I have issues with not doing things to the best of my ability. I also have issues with not being able to fill my workday with work. You know, what I'm being paid for? I would be the absolute worst person to ask about quiet quitting. A few months into the new AM's tenure, my station was at a standstill due to an engineering problem with a new variant of a machine that I could practically build blindfolded. I had 4 to 5 college-educated engineers crowding my station attempting to figure out a problem that arose only after the machine was fully assembled, which I explained exactly how it could be fixed with minimal effort, by the way, and I was correct, but that's a different story. While waiting for the engineers to come to the same conclusion as me, they did eventually, I went to the warehouseman responsible for pulling the parts I needed to assemble and asked him to switch over to a different machine I was going to build. The AM happened to wander over just then and asked what I was doing. I explained the situation with the engineers and that I was currently unable to work on those machines, and rather than standing there looking lazy, I was trying to get a jump start on the other machines I needed to build that day. At no point did I get sarcastic, which is my normal mode of communication, or mean, nor was I flippant in any way whatsoever. I was merely trying to get some work done that we both knew needed to get done. He starts loudly berating me in front of the entire shop, both the assembly area and the machine shop, specifically saying, "You're not allowed to do more than what I tell you to do in the order I tell you to do it." I placated him as best I could and went back to my work area, which was still overrun with engineers, and settled down for a long wait. Cue the MC, because I didn't work on another machine for the rest of the day. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was told I wasn't allowed. He didn't just want obedience, he needed your mind to stop working. Your ability to solve problems and manage your own workflow was a direct threat to his shaky authority. In his world, a thinking employee was a dangerous one. A couple of hours later, I was called into the AM's office for a meeting. I was expecting another stern talking to, which I could handle. Being ex-military, I'd long grown accustomed to being chewed out by people who didn't know how to do the job I was doing. What I was not accustomed to was getting a write-up for trying to do my job, especially since the official reason was insubordination. The AM didn't even have the courage to do it himself. He foisted it off on my immediate supervisor, who wasn't involved in the prior situation and had no idea what had happened earlier. I think he was busy putting out a different fire. When he asked what happened that justified my first and only write-up in the 2.5 years I'd worked for the company, when I explained it to my supervisor, all he could do was shake his head in disbelief. He was a good supervisor, at least when it came to getting the best out of most people, but he also wasn't really known for rocking the boat to stick up for his people. That said, when he tried to get me to sign it, I refused because I obviously disagreed. He said he understood, but he'd have to talk to AM about it. That didn't go well. I could hear the yelling half a building away, despite the machinery running. Once again, I was called to AM's office, but this time I was facing the AM. He immediately started yelling at me again, but not just about the earlier incident. Now he wanted to know why I hadn't built the day's allotment of machines. I coolly reminded him that not only was there an engineering problem with the machines I was supposed to build, he told me not to work on any other machines, and to do so was insubordination, as he so callously put it in the write-up. Then he asked me if I was going to sign the write-up. Once again, I refused. I don't think it's right or fair to be reprimanded for doing my job. If you don't like it, he said through clenched teeth, find another job. I can find 1,000 people who can do that job. I never said otherwise, jackwagon. I was fed up now and refused to tamp down my anger any longer, but you'll need at least 3 people to do everything I can do as easily and as well as I can. Good luck with that. I left him standing there, completely flustered, went to my work area to gather my personal effects, walked over to my supervisor. I informed him that I was going home and would like to use my accrued PTO and vacation time for the next 2 weeks. He told me it was no problem, and as he was approving my request, I let him know that I was also giving my 2-week notice and wouldn't be back. He shook my hand and wished me well in my future endeavors. I did the same and left. I got to leave on my terms, and through my son, who also worked there, as well as various friends I'd made while working there, I did learn that the company had to hire no less than 5 people to replace me and my expertise. I also got the last laugh because I'm pretty sure AM got fired a couple of years later for various reasons, not least of which was the lagging productivity and his driving a mass exodus of the best personnel in the assembly area. And our last story. Karen tried to blame us for her crash, ended up in handcuffs. My name's Paul, and I've been a manager at a car dealership long enough to believe I'd seen it all. Buyers who swear the car felt different the moment they drove off the lot. People who suddenly discover they don't like the color after signing paperwork. Folks who think a free oil change entitles them to a full engine replacement. After years of that, you develop a thick skin and a pretty reliable internal alarm for nonsense. That alarm went off the moment Karen walked back through our doors. About a week earlier, she'd purchased a used sedan from us. Nothing fancy, nothing sketchy. Mid-range model, clean Carfax, no accident history, and a documented inspection done right before delivery. Brakes measured and logged, suspension checked, fluids topped off. She test drove it twice, asked a dozen questions, negotiated hard, signed every line, and left smiling. Standard transaction. Forgettable even. 7 days later, I was at my desk catching up on emails when I heard shouting echo through the showroom. Not raised voices, not an argument. This was full-on yelling, the kind that makes conversations stop mid-sentence. I stepped out of my office just in time to see a woman marching toward the front counter, purse swinging, face flushed, eyes locked on our staff like she was ready to throw down. It took me half a second to recognize her. Karen slammed her purse onto the counter so hard it made a hollow thud and screamed, "You sold me a death trap!" The entire showroom froze. Sales reps stopped typing. Customers turned. Even our finance guy leaned out of his office to see what was happening. I walked up calmly and introduced myself, asking what seemed to be the problem. She launched straight into it. She'd been in an accident. The brakes had completely failed. We'd knowingly sold her a defective car. She accused us of sabotaging it, endangering her life, and committing fraud. Within 30 seconds, she was demanding a full refund, compensation for emotional trauma, and threatening to shut this place down. I nodded, let her finish, and then asked the most basic question in the world. "I'm sorry to hear you were in an accident. Where's the car now?" She stiffened. "That's none of your business." I asked again, explaining that if there was a mechanical failure, we needed to inspect the vehicle. Tow receipt, police report, anything at all? She immediately changed the subject, started swearing at the staff, and accused us of playing dumb. Customers were openly staring now. One family quietly grabbed their kids and walked out. I kept my tone even. We can't investigate a brake issue without seeing the car. If it's here, we'll put it on a lift today. That's when she lost it. She started yelling about cover-ups and conspiracies, claiming we were trying to destroy evidence. She demanded money on the spot, or she'd call a lawyer, the media, and everyone on Facebook. At that point, another manager, Mike, stepped in to help de-escalate. He repeated exactly what I'd said, calmly and politely. Karen stepped toward him and slapped him, open-handed, right across the chest and shoulder. Not a shove, not an accidental bump, a deliberate hit. The sound echoed. The room went dead silent. When her fabricated story hit the wall of a simple, logical question, her only remaining move was physical force. The slap wasn't just anger, it was the admission that her argument had nowhere left to go. Mike just stood there, stunned. I immediately told one of the sales reps to call the police. Karen started screaming again, now claiming we'd assaulted her and that she was afraid for her life. She backed toward the exit, still yelling threats and lawsuits. The police arrived within minutes. They separated everyone, took statements, and pulled the security footage. Our cameras cover every inch of that showroom, and the video was crystal clear. Karen striking Mike unprovoked. An officer asked her again where the car was. She tried to dodge the question. He asked again, slower this time. That's when she finally cracked. The car was totaled, completely wrecked. The police report from the accident said driver error. She'd rear-ended another vehicle at speed. No mention of brake failure, no mechanical defect, nothing. Once that came out, the officer's tone changed. They stopped indulging her narrative and focused on the facts. One officer calmly explained that she was being arrested for assault right there in the middle of the showroom. Customers watched as she was handcuffed. Phones came out. Karen screamed the whole time, insisting it was a setup and that we'd sold her a bad car. One officer finally said evenly, "Ma'am, you hit someone. That's why you're being arrested." After she was gone, we pulled every record on that vehicle again just to be thorough. Inspection sheets, brake measurements, service logs. Everything was clean, exactly as documented. Karen never got a refund. She never got compensation. What she did get was a criminal charge, a lifetime ban from our dealership, and a very uncomfortable conversation with her insurance company about why she'd tried to blame a business instead of taking responsibility. I've dealt with angry customers before. I've dealt with liars, but blaming your own accident on a dealership and then assaulting staff when the story falls apart is a special kind of entitlement. The kind that doesn't end with a refund, just a pair of handcuffs and a long walk out the front door. Each story is a lesson in leverage. The custodian used social exclusion, the assembly worker used malicious compliance, and the manager used documented facts. Their antagonists wanted control over narrative, over workflow, over blame, but each protagonist found a way to weaponize the system against them. The real victory wasn't just in winning the conflict, but in proving that the bully's power was always an illusion. Which resolution was the most effective or satisfying? Cast your vote in the comments. Story 1, 2, or 3. Thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.